Okay, so we're going to do another word study today. And these are always interesting. I'm amazed how much comes out when you dig deeply into a word and its original meaning and the variety of ways it's used. What we're going to talk about hornets. So in the Bible, God told the Israelites that he would send the hornet to drive out the enemies from the land, which would then make that land available for the Israelites to move into and to occupy. Okay, so let's go ahead with reading verses. Axel, if you could be first, please, and read Exodus 23:27.
I will send my fear before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. And I will make all thine enemies turn their backs unto thee.
And 28, sorry.
And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before thee.
Okay, that word destroy in verse 27 is usually translated as discomfited, which is a word we looked at quite recently, if you remember. And you know, when you look at that verse, he will destroy them and then drive them out. You know, if destroyed, if the original word that's used here, translated destroy, actually meant to be destroyed, as in killed, then there's no reason to drive them out. They're dead, right? So just evidence that destroy in that use means something more like discomfited. It doesn't mean destroyed as in killed.
Can I
comment? Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
In my Bible, that verse, Exodus 27, instead of destroy, is what it says. I will send my fear before you. I will cause confusion among all the people to whom you come. And I will make all thy enemies turn their backs to you.
Okay, so confusion instead of destroy.
Instead of destroy, yeah.
I think that was absolutely better there.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we? So what was the cause of them being discomfited or confused, right?
Confused,
Or
yeah.
driven out? Leviticus 18:3, Dorothy.
After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do, and after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do, neither shall ye walk in their ordinances.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Gotcha.
So don't walk in their ordinances, don't do the things they're doing. And here's a couple of verses, or there's a number of verses in between that we won't read, that list their sins. They're mostly illicit sexual relations, but also, and this is the worst one, Exodus 18:21, Gary.
Okay, and you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord.
Okay, so they would actually have their children pass through the fire and be burned in the fire. That's pretty atrocious sin, I would say. Okay, and then
Yeah.
Jeff, Leviticus 18:24-25, please.
Okay, New King James. Do not defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you. For the land is defiled, therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it, and the land vomits out its inhabitants.
Okay, that's pretty descriptive, isn't it? That word visit there, we looked at that recently, and I'm trying to get better at putting the links in here, because if people watch the video after, there's the link. Okay, I just highlighted it where we studied the word visit. Okay, and to visit means what? Does anyone remember what visit the iniquity means?
I have to refresh my memory.
Judy?
Does it mean they reap the consequences of?
Yeah, basically reap the consequences. He allows the natural results of their course of action to happen. He doesn't interfere with it. It's reap what you sow. His respecting free will really is what it amounts to. So God tells them to be careful to obey and not commit the abominations of the people who left, or they will suffer the same fate. Okay, we want Leviticus 18:28, Judy.
Lest the land vomit you out also when you defile it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you.
Okay, and that vomit out is interesting. We've touched on that a bit before, and I think Gary talked about that a bit when we talked about dominion of the earth, but that's something we may look at again in the future. So those nations were not only spewed out when they reached a certain level of sinfulness, but here's another verse about those nations. Genesis 15:16. Michael?
Okay, Genesis 15:16 from the screen. But in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full.
Okay, so the Amorites were a powerful and dominant race of Canaanites. Canaanites just means people who lived in Canaan. Okay, so that include Amorites and Hivites and Hittites and different nations, but the Amorites were a particularly powerful race, and it just mentions them there. So land vomiting out the inhabitants, we've talked about that. We talked about visiting the iniquity. The suggestion is that the land where they lived, or something in the land would react in such a way as to drive the people out. It's like the whole earth is starting to do now in reaction to the wickedness of modern man. Like we're having earthquakes and floods and terrible storms and everything. The earth itself is reacting. In our case, it's not just the land of Canaan, it's the whole world. And we're not going to take off to Mars or anything, so we're kind of stuck here. So the question here is, were the Hornets involved in expelling the Canaanites?
Ew.
Okay. Do you think Hornets like that would send them running?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, they're
Is that
Yeah.
those
huge.
giant murder hornets?
Yeah,
Ew,
I'm hoping that one isn't
I'm
actually
thinking the
real.
same.
it looks real.
It does, doesn't it?
Ugh,
And
how big it is. It's gross.
yeah, that's the stinger there. I don't want to get jabbed with that. So it could be that the Hornets were involved, but there are a few possible meanings for Hornets. Okay. So one is literal insects.
Yeah.
And we've all encountered Hornets at different times, probably. Another one is it could be the Egyptians. They repeatedly invaded Palestine during the time of Joshua and the Judges. One commentary said, I had a quick look and I couldn't see much that supported that, but I didn't look at everything. So I don't tend to go with that one. But one reason they did that, this is a hieroglyph, and it has to do with Pharaoh, and it's describing him, or his name is in there or something. And here's a bee or a hornet. Okay, that was involved with designating Egyptians. But another possibility I'm going to say for the meaning of hornets is fear. It does put fear into people, doesn't it? As we saw that little video at the beginning. So note the parallelism in the first passage we read. That's evidence that the hornets are a symbol of fear. It says, I will send my fear, and note the Strong's number before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. And I will make all thine enemies turn their backs unto thee. And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out all these people. So I will send fear, and I will send hornets. In the kind of parallel structure they would use in Hebrew a lot of the times, you could basically equate those two. So you could almost go, and I kind of think you could, fear equals hornets, or hornets are a symbol of fear. Okay, and we'll see meaning beyond that as well as we go forward. And where it says send, yeah, in both cases, send fear and send hornets. Send in both cases is this Hebrew word shalak, and we've looked at that a bit before. It's often used in the permissive sense. Okay, and again, I've got a link, and you'd be able to pick that up in the video later if you watched it, where we talked about the permissive sense. Okay, and the word definition for sent in this case. Okay, let's go to Exodus 23:31. Paul, please.
And I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea Philistia, and from the desert to the river. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you.
Okay, what's the Sea of the Philistines? Just off the top of it, does anyone know what that is?
That'd be the Mediterranean.
It's the Mediterranean, yes. If you look at any map showing the distribution of those different nations, the Philistines are right along the shore of the Mediterranean there. So that's what it's referring to.
Hey, Ray,
Yes.
could Hornets be like the mechanism at which the fear is sent, like whether it's literal hornets or whether it's just man, or some sort of just, the way that the fear is brought forth, the mechanism for the fear. Like, for example, what's going on in the world today, there's the fear, and then the hornets could be like of, a virus or of a shot, a jab, or, the structure, the mechanism for which the fear is brought forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of made a link between the jab and this thing here. But you're right, Jeff.
Well, you said the word jab there with that stinger, right? I caught that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Careful, we're gonna get shut down.
Yeah, careful what words you use here. Yes, it could be the mechanism, and we'll see that more as we go forward. There's an interesting connection between what causes fear and the reaction that we should be having. I'm not maybe expressing it right, but you'll see as we go forward. And just a reminder to everyone, and Jeff, we're trying to do this more. If you have a comment, use the reactions and raise your hand. It just makes it easier, especially if we get more people. So, okay. Did you read that?
Yeah, Paul read
Okay,
that.
Paul read that one. So who or what is driving them out? It says in verse 28, I will send hornets, which shall drive them out. But then it says in verse 31, thou shalt drive them out. So who's driving them out?
That's Israel driving them out.
Israel driving them out in verse 31 in that case.
Mhm.
But you can see there's a bit of a contradiction or a double meaning or something here. The hornets are also involved in driving them out. So we could ask, why would the Israelites have to drive them out if the hornets were going to do it? Perhaps this might help us. Perhaps it was a two-step process, like God's part and Israel's part. God's part being, I will send my fear, I will send hornets, I will deliver the inhabitants into your hand, and then Israel's part, thou shalt drive them out. Can you see that it might be kind of a two-part process there?
Yeah.
And okay, God said, I will send my fear before them. So we should look at that question. Did fear go before them? Paul?
This thing about God's fear it's an understanding of these people that saw what God had done for his people, and they in their minds thought that God was going to come after them also. So they had this conception of God that he was a tyrant, I guess. And so there was this fear that they brought on themselves in their own minds, not that God was going to do anything to them to hurt them, but I think they believed that he would if they didn't follow him or get out of the way, so to speak.
Yeah, so God did something. He did various things, like he brought the Israelites over the Red Sea in miraculous fashion. These nations all heard about it. They read it in their newspapers or whatever. They reacted in different ways. Some of them were really afraid. You know, this God is going to get us. We've not been obeying him. Some reacted a different way. Remember Rahab the harlot, when Joshua and Caleb, I guess it was them, were at her place there in Jericho. And she said, the fear of God is among the people, but she acknowledged that he was the true God. She had a different reaction. She was more of the in awe sort of fear, whereas other people were more in the shaking in the boots sort of fear. Okay, here's a verse I'm referring to this, Joshua 2:9. So we go back now to Axel again.
And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you.
Okay, I don't have it here, but Axel, since you have it, does the next verse, or maybe the previous one, speak of her giving glory to God or something? Just take a quick look there. Maybe not.
Yes, it's 10. It's 10 through to 12, though. Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, read at least the significant part there. Yeah.
Okay. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when ye came out of Egypt, and what he did unto the kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom he utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord God, he is God in heaven above and earth beneath.
Okay, so she refers to the fear that evidently she felt along with others, but she is acknowledging that he is the God of heaven. So she's taken a different attitude. So did fear go before Israel in that case, in the case of Jericho? Definitely did, didn't it? Yeah. Were the armies of Israel already there surrounding Jericho at that point? Where were they?
They were still on the other side of the Jordan.
Gilgal.
Okay, Gilgal, other side of the Jordan. They hadn't even crossed the Jordan yet. They just sent a couple of spies in. So the fear definitely went before them. Okay, Deuteronomy 11:25, Dorothy.
There shall no man be able to stand before you, for the Lord your God shall lay the fear of you and the dread of you upon all the land that ye shall tread upon, as he hath said unto you.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then Joshua 5:1. Gary.
So it was when all the kings of the Amorites who were on the west side of the Jordan and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we had crossed over, that their heart melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the children of Israel.
Okay, so their heart melted as a way of saying they lost their courage. They were full of fear. Joshua 10:1 and 2, Jeff, please.
Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king. So he had done to, am I saying that right? Ai?
AI.
Ai?
Yeah.
Ai, okay. And its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty.
Okay, so can you see quite clearly that the fear went before, fear of Israel, fear of their God went before them?
Mhm.
That's quite clear from a few verses, and there's more. So let's look at the two other hornet verses. There's only actually 3 verses that use that word hornet, and it's always translated from the same original Hebrew word. So Deuteronomy 7:20 is the next one, Judy.
Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among them until those who are left, who hide themselves from you, are destroyed.
Okay, and then the third one is Joshua 24:12. Michael.
Joshua 24:12. And I sent the hornet before you, which drave them out from before you, even the 2 kings of the Amorites, but not with thy sword, nor with thy bow.
Okay, so a question we need to look at here, and we're going to take a short break here in a few minutes or shortly. The question is, does God use force? And we can kind of narrow this question down a bit. If God used his angels to drive the Canaanites and the Amorites out of the land, would that be force on his part? Like, it's not doing it directly, but it's using his angels to do it. Would that constitute him using force, Paul?
You know, when you say his angels, I've always looked at those verses, knowing the character of God, that he doesn't use force. And so I would reconcile it to myself this way. I would ask myself, was Satan an angel? Yes, he was. Were there other fallen angels? Yes, there were. So they're all God's angels, even though they're fallen. So when I read these verses that say the angel of the Lord, to me, that's Satan and his fallen angels that are doing these things, not God's angels, the holy angels, I guess you can call them.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Let's just look at that question, though. This is a theoretical question, obviously. If God used his angels, he sanctions them to do it, he orders them to do it, go and wipe out these people. You know, he's responsible for ordering them to do it. If he did that, would that be force on his part?
Yes.
Yes, not directly, but indirectly, he'd be responsible for it. We call him a forceful God. If a king of a nation on earth orders his army to go and destroy another one, then that king is using force. If God used his hornets to drive them out, especially if it was hornets almost as big as angels, would that be using force?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. He's ordering the hornets or somehow influencing them to go and sting and harass these people. If God is not a God of force, then we need to reconcile this. Excuse me, Michael.
Oh, my hand went up, did it?
Yes, it did.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, does God use force? How can he? He's not sanctioning anything that results in any discomfort or pain or suffering on anything that he created, that he brought into existence. And that includes man. He's not responsible for the hornets doing it. They're just responding to the garbage that's going on within these people that are basically on the verge of self-destruction. So God's not responsible for that, because that is, as you say, Ray, that's him using force. Otherwise, that's him using force.
Yep.
So.
Okay, we want to take our break here, but Gary, if you have a quick question or comment, let's do that and then we'll take a break.
Jesus made the statement, he asked the Apostle Paul, why are you kicking against the pricks? Have you ever been pricked with a sharp object?
Yeah,
A hornet has a sharp, a hornet has a sharp object by which it pricks you. When there are so many places where God shows up in the Bible, one right off the top of my head is Daniel was it Daniel 8 or Daniel 10, when Daniel had the vision and there were other men with him. And it says, then this terror overtook them and they ran. It seems to me when the holiness of God, the presence of God, when people begin to sense that, when God shows up in a place, that people are terrified, that they are pricked in their conscience. They have this conviction of sin because God's holiness, by way of contrast, exposes the wickedness in their heart, and they flee in terror and they run.
Okay.
Whereas Daniel, in that instance there, Daniel did what? He fell on his knees, fell on his face, and said, I'm a corrupt person. There's no comeliness in me. I'm not righteous. And this was just an angel. And at the tomb of Christ, when the angels there, what happened to the Roman soldiers? They all fell back like dead men when they came to arrest Christ. When some of his divinity came through, they all fell back. And so could this hornet be a conviction of sin, a prick of the conscience,
Okay.
where we see our wickedness?
Okay, you're getting ahead of me, Gary, but I think you're right on track. That's good. I see Jeff has his hand up. So Jeff, go ahead and then we'll take a break.
Yeah, so that word, the hornet there, the 6880 Sirah or whatever, I'm just noticing it in my Strong's referencing 6879, which is Sarah, which gives some definition about the word scourge, which is like an instrument of punishment, and also to be stricken with leprosy. So I'm just making a connection with, maybe the hornets could also symbolize just sickness and disease as well. So you have fear, and then you have, a wave of some sort of sickness or something. It's just interesting that it's connected to leprosy.
Pestilence.
Okay, good. There's a number of possibilities there, but I think we're going to narrow it down here pretty quickly. We've just introduced this question, does God use force? And we've connected it with the hornets, because if I went to, say I captured a hornet nest, and a person could do that. I've certainly worked with bees. You could go into a neighbor's house that you didn't like and throw it in the door or something. That would be using force. That would make them run.
Nasty.
So let's continue on and read. Just give me a sec here. Read the next verse. What is it? Acts 12:23. Paul, please.
Then immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give glory to God, and he was eaten by worms and died.
Okay, I just bring this up because it's another example, possibly, or has been interpreted this way as God using force. Does anyone remember and want to quickly explain how we understood that to not be a use of force on God's part? Anyone remember?
Well, he
that?
was, it's, sorry, let me go through the process.
Oh, Gary has his hand up. Go ahead, Gary.
All right. It's what I think it's what we've been talking about. It's where the Lord convicts of sin. He pricks the conscience like a hornet pricks us. And it says here, but instead of him repenting, or instead of him running away like those guys did there in Daniel's experience when he had the vision, they refused to repent. He doesn't run away. And when he does, God gives him up, gives him over. The door is open for Satan to come in, and because he didn't give God the glory, he didn't repent. He didn't say, I'm sorry, Lord, that I am this way, that I've been this way towards you. And the worms got him.
Good. Remember, this is a significant part of it here. It says the Lord smote him, and we won't turn to it now, but if you go back earlier, I think it's about verse 7, Peter was in prison just before this, and it said an angel came in and smote Peter on the side. It was basically to get his attention, to wake him up, to take him out of prison. But the word smote in that case with Peter is exactly the same Greek word as in the Lord smote him here in verse 23. So basically what happened in both Peter's case and Herod's case as the smiting was to get their attention. Okay. So remember, Herod's sin was a sin of pride. He has been hailed as this is a god and all that. And God struck his conscience, we could say, pricked his conscience. But he did not react in the right way. And the guilt and whatever resulting from that resulted in his death, as history says, about 5 days later. The smiting his conscience was immediate, says immediately, but his death was 5 days later. Okay, so God did not smite and kill him, nor did his angel. So when we look at fear in these uses, there's different possible meanings for fear. One is a Greek word phobos, and it means scared, like phobia. There's all sorts of phobias. Another use of fear is as in awe or reverence. And I believe another one, and I don't have a lot of backing for this, but it's kind of my understanding in some cases, is basically to pay attention to. Okay. And let's go to this verse, I think might be used that way. Well, let's look here at this is the Hebrew word pakad, and it gives the definitions. It says to be in dread or to be in awe. So right there, we've got both definitions. Now I'm adding this pay attention to, and if we could read Revelation 14:7, that'd be Axel, please.
Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters.
Okay. I'll just quickly explain why I think fear God in that case means pay attention to him, listen to him. If you go back to Revelation 8, and we don't have to turn there, it describes the 7 trumpets. And it says the first trumpet sounded and there fell a great mountain and burned the earth, and the next one fell and it burned the trees and the grass or something like that. And the way it works is the trumpet sounded, which implies a message being given. And then there's disasters and things. Like, I think of it as distraction. It doesn't say what the messages are. Okay, just the first angel sounded, the second angel sounded, etc. And after each one, there's a disaster, I believe, to distract the people. And then it comes to Revelation 14:7, and it says, fear God, like pay attention to him. And there in Revelation 14, you get the start of the different angels' messages. We refer to the 3 angels' messages, and there's other ones beyond that as well. Okay, so that's another possible meaning. And here in Revelation 20, or Exodus rather, 23:27, I've kind of broken it down. I will send my fear, okay, that could be hornets, before thee, and will destroy. And the original word for destroy is actually discomfit, confuse. I think it could be prick or smite the conscience. Will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. Like, it'll get them thinking. Israel is coming. They've had all these successes fighting against other nations. Now we've got a choice to make. We can either resist them, or Rahab and a few others made the right choice to honor the God of heaven. So I have this idea that the discomfiture, the fear, was a response to God smiting the conscience and their failure to respond positively. Like, God can smite your conscience and you either respond positively or negatively and maybe run. So the hornet may be symbolic of something different that we might call a psyop, if you know what a psyop is. It's like a psychological operation or attack. And we read this verse before on Joshua 24:12, and I sent the hornet before you, which drave them out from before you, even the 2 kings of the Amorites, but not with the sword nor with thy bow. So note that the two kings of the Amorites would be driven out by the hornet and not by the force of Israelites' swords. But how can we say that, since we have the record of history, which says that the Israelites warred upon them? Right here in Numbers 21:24. Dorothy, if you could read that, please.
And Israel smote him with the edge of the sword. There it is.
Yep.
And possessed his land from Arnon unto Labok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong.
Okay, so Joshua 24:12
Yeah.
is saying, drive them out not with the sword. And Numbers 21:24 says what actually happened. They smote him with the edge of the sword. Okay, and
Edge
the
of the
hymn
sword,
there
yeah.
is Sihon, king of the Amorites, in verse 21. And if you go down further in the chapter, let's read verse 35. That would be Gary, please.
Okay. So they defeated him, his sons, and all his people until there was no survivor left him, and they took possession of his land.
Okay, it's pretty clear in the context that this is referring to the Amorites. So then, what does it mean, but not with thy sword nor with thy bow? Okay.
Good question.
So here's from a commentary that says, it seems clear that the signal victory over these kings was not due to the skill of the sword and bow, but rather to the special blessing of God. Hornets then seem to be figurative of the assistance God provided to give success to the armies of Israel. The figure is appropriate. As hornets would produce consternation and panic in a camp, so the Lord would send fear, terror, quaking, and confusion into the camp of the nations to unnerve them for battle. Okay, so it says the assistance God provided. What is the form of that assistance?
Fear.
Yeah, to confuse them.
Yeah, fear and confusion. And that is either, I'm going to say that's either God removing his protection from Israel's enemies or prompting their consciences to change course. And we've talked about this before. Does God want to remove his protection?
No.
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 Does God want Israel's enemies to die by the sword? We should even ask that question.
No.
No, he wants everyone to repent.
No.
Right. Does God want his people to kill others and suffer the resulting PTSD?
No.
No.
No, that's a terrible thing to have to go to war and kill other people. You end up with something like PTSD. So could the Hornets, the call to the conscience, be a last-minute attempt to get them to change course to avert the danger and death they were about to face?
Yes.
Okay, so Hornets pricking the conscience, a call to repentance provided to these nations because they're about to be attacked by Israel. And somebody's going to die in a case like that. Okay, Dorothy?
Yeah, so he provided that what we just read, and then the choice was theirs. So they still have free choice there.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not forced on them
Right, good.
because
So could the Hornets, the call to the conscience, be a last-minute attempt to get them to change course, to avert the danger and death they were about to face? Does that
Yes.
make sense?
yeah.
Okay, good. And this principle is seen in this account of Rahab when she was hiding the spies, Joshua and Caleb. She said to them, Joshua 9, Jeff, if you could read that, please.
All right, 2:9-11 here.
Yeah.
And said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath.
Okay, so it seems like, is this possible, that before many of these encounters with the enemy, God would send hornets, send fear? Gary, comment?
There on the toward the highlighted or the heavy part of that last verse, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man. That's almost exactly what Daniel said. He said, there remain no more strength in me. That's just another way of saying what Daniel said there.
Right.
You know, I mean, here I am, the holiness of God, and there I'm just floored because there's no, I have no strength. I have no courage. It's basically the same thing Daniel said.
Yeah.
He melted to the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Daniel 10:8. Good.
Yeah.
So here's the question though, and we'll resolve that with this next verse. Does God send fear? Let's read 2 Timothy 1:7. Judy.
For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
Okay. So that makes it sound like God is not into scaring people. To me, could he rather be giving a last minute appeal to the conscience?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think Dorothy has really seen this. That's good. Okay, so here is another case of fear and fleeing in Revelation 6:15-16. Michael.
And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb.
You know, it always, Gary, I've seen your hand was just still up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've always kind of wondered about that verse, but I think I have the solution. This is the second coming scenario. They're afraid this lamb, mad lamb, is going to hurt them in some way. And so they run and ask for mountains and rocks to fall on them. Wouldn't that hurt? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Or how can we make sense of it? Any thoughts? What are they really afraid of, Axel?
I'm just thinking that fear is contrary to God's entire character. I came across a where is it? A text. I think it's John. Just one second. It's John. It's First John. Sorry, 1 John 4:18. 1 John 4:18, and it says, yeah, and it says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. So this in itself is quite contrary to God's ways. I don't think he has anything to do with anything that invokes fear. Moreover, I think the fear comes when we stand outside of God's will, when our will supplants what God's will is for us. I think that's where the problem comes in. The problems come in.
Yeah. Okay, Paul.
Getting back to that verse, I myself feel that when they see that God is coming, that their conscience is going to prick them really hard, and they're going to know that there is a living God, and they're going to realize and reflect on their lives and see how wrong they were, and that's why they're trying to hide and get away, because they just can't face it. So that's
Right.
how I see it.
And you say face it. What they're trying to get away from is the face of the Lamb. It doesn't actually say that. I think it's
Face of him that sitteth on the
okay.
throne.
There it is. Face of him that sitteth on the throne. That's a way of referring to his character in a sense. They're seeing their own sinfulness in contrast to that. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said, Ray. They're seeing themselves and all their action, the whole life, right? Nothing other than mountains and rocks of what they're really like themselves, but on the sin side. So yeah, they just can't handle themselves anymore.
Yeah. Okay, Dorothy and Michael, your pictures disappeared somehow. Go ahead, Dorothy.
That's fine.
Yeah, I just have a question about the day of the Lord. Isn't that when Jesus comes and he's angry and he's going to take vengeance on the believers themselves? Like, so I kind of was studying about it, and that's the impression I get. Am I wrong? That's going to happen?
Yes and no. If you go to the glossary here on my website, he is angry and wrathful, but that needs to be correctly understood. Okay. So if you go to the glossary and you can find the word, well, it's under, I'm gradually adding to this, it's under the term wrath or anger. Look at that definition and it'll tell you from the Bible what that means. And basically, it's a strong emotion, it's grief in many cases. And vengeance, same thing. You have to look at that and look at what how the Bible defines vengeance. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I just can't help but think about drawing the parallel with parenting. A good parent disciplines their child, and the child, if they fear their parents, they do something wrong, they're in fear of the discipline, but they're not in fear of like, oh, my dad's gonna whoop my butt. It's more like a fear of letting down the parents, and when the parents carry out this discipline, they're not, being abusive, but they have to discipline in a way that brings judgment to, and correction to the behavior of the child, right? So does that make the parent unloving? No. Does the child fear the parent? No. But you could use those words, right? So I just see those parallels here, and that helps me kind of understand, like, what Dorothy was talking about, right? With when he comes back and has judgment, like that's kind of just the way that I think of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good parallels and lessons we can learn when we look at our parenting experiences. And by the way, Jeff, I haven't seen you for 2 or 3 years. How many children do you have now?
We're up to 5 now.
5. Oh, good. Okay,
Anna and Ryan have 6 now.
okay,
And you probably remember Sean and Lacey, the Campbells.
yeah.
Mhm.
They have 9 now.
Whoa,
Wow.
you have some catching up to do.
Well, it's really hard with a lot of these rules for gathering because 2 or 3 of our families try to go to the beach together, and there's like 40 of us. It's crazy.
Okay,
Sounds like
good.
fun.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to this verse, Proverbs 23:32. Paul.
The context in this verse has to do with wine. At the last, it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And I've got this definition here from Strong's, and
Stingeth?
yeah, I better go to that verse. I'm not sure where I'm taking that from. Just give me a sec here. Proverbs 23:32. Proverbs 23:32. Strong's. Yeah, okay. It's the word stingeth. I should have put that in there. 65, 67. Okay, so the definition for stingeth in this verse is, or includes at least, to make distinct, declare, distinguish. Okay. Does the conscience do that? You know, it brings to our attention things we've done wrong. Paul?
Is that from the Septuagint?
This is
'Cause I
right
see you
out.
have the Greek.
This is right out of King James.
You have the Greek in there.
Oh, okay. I'm looking further down where it shows Greek, a Greek number there.
There.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, why do you have it in there?
Why do I have Greek in there? Not sure. Sorry. Okay, it's just showing what the equivalent word is in Greek, I think, is what it is, because this is, of course, a Hebrew word being from Proverbs. Okay, let's go on. So here's an interesting example, I think, which is also an example of someone being smitten. Okay. Acts 26:14. Axel, please.
And when we were all fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks.
Okay, good. And then Dorothy, Revelation 9 and verse 10.
And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt man 5 months.
Okay, I've not looked at some of these prophetic parts of Revelation for a while, and you know, I'd have to look back and figure out again how I understand those verses, but this puts a kind of a new twist into it. If stings in their tails could possibly mean afflictions of conscience, then that's a whole nother way of looking at that, but I have not looked into it. So, okay, so that's about what I have for hornets. Can you see then that the hornets could be equated with stings, pricks, calls to the conscience? Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Mhm.
Good. I got a bit more here that I'm going to skip over, and I want to go down just to use up the time we have to talk about some things from this past Wednesday evening. We had a call there where some new people were on. We had 13 people. The video is here. That shows the link if you haven't seen it, if you want to watch it. And we did have a couple of questions that one person asked that I'd like to, we'll bring up, maybe look at one of them anyway. And it was a question from about the 39-minute mark. Paul thankfully went through it and found again where that question was asked. The questioner said, I would like some evidence that God keeps his own law. And he used the example, a teacher can make laws for his students that he does not have to keep. Okay, we could reason that out. Of course, the question, and I like to think about these questions before trying to provide an answer off the top of my head. So I've thought about it and I've written it out a bit. And I just want to see if you want to add anything to it, maybe have a different way of looking at it. Of course, the question is really, does God keep his own laws 100% of the time? Because of course he keeps his laws. But does he do it always? That's really the question. So you can look at it from two directions. There are many examples of God keeping his own laws. However, we cannot prove that he always does unless we can know everything he does. And of course, we can't do that, right? So we have to, so really we can't answer that question. Does God keep his own laws 100% of the time? I don't know what he's done all the time. But so we need to look at any evidence implying that he does. Yeah, I see Axel there. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, when you speak of the law, I assume you're speaking in terms of the moral law, the 10 Commandments, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking that reading the 10 Commandments, I see it as his character, his illustration of who he is. You know, he's not a killer, he's not a thief, he's not a murderer, he's not, you know, all these things. And so really, I see that the law as an embodiment of who he is as a person. And it's not so much him keeping his law, but can he be anything other than who he is?
No, he cannot.
Yeah. So for me, I would say in response, he is 100% what his law is. It's not an active keeping of the law. He can't do anything else. It's him. It's a transcript of his character. It's just him.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, a transcript of his character. We've talked about that before. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree with Axel where all of the law, I wouldn't even just limit it to the 10 Commandments, because on the 10 hang the rest, right? And they all can be summarized under the 2.
Yes.
And they all embody the character of God and who he is and what he's about, right? So if somebody were to ask me this specific question, do we have, does God always keep his laws? I'd say in general, as a whole, in the spirit, yes, but in the literal, if you break it down and say, okay, like clearly Jesus would not have been keeping laws pertaining to menstruation, right? So there is an example of a law that is God's law that Jesus himself would not have been keeping because it's not applicable to him. So I would just talk about, if someone asked me that question, I would give the explanation of, if you're not a farmer, you don't keep laws for farming. If you're not this, or if you're not a priest or a judge, you don't keep those. So in the grand scheme of things, God's always keeping his law. But if you break them down and were to like print off a list of laws, there are clearly going to be ones that aren't kept. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have to understand it was the laws that apply to you. If I'm 10 years old and don't have a driver's license, could someone say I'm not keeping the law that says I need to stop at a stop sign? Well, it doesn't apply. I'm not driving. So I understand what you're saying. Okay. Okay, let's read these verses. So we have to look at evidence from scripture implying that he does keep his own law, because we can't watch him all the time and check everything he does. So John 15:10, Gary.
If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love.
Okay, so this is Jesus saying he's kept his Father's commandments. Okay, and then John 14:9, Jeff.
Jesus said unto him, have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He hath seen me, hath seen the Father, and this is King James here, it's hard to read. And how sayest thou then, show us the Father? I didn't have my Bible turned open to it, so I cheated and read off your screen there.
No problem. That's good to hear different versions too, but you can just read off the screen. So that's circumstantial or whatever evidence that he does keep his own law. And I'm sure there's other examples. I just plug those in quickly at the end here. So the other way to look at it is, are there any examples of God not keeping his own law? And I would say on a surface reading, if you want to read literally, then yes, there's lots of them. Killing Ananias and Sapphira, King Herod, Saul, etc. But the challenge is to answer them all, because we understand that he did not kill Ananias and Sapphira or King Herod or Saul. And it says Saul killed himself in another verse. But people bring these up. See, God is not keeping his own laws. You know, he does kill people. So the challenge is to answer them all. And that's hard to do because there's lots of examples of it. And even if we could prove that in every case in the Bible where it looks like he was not keeping the law, in order to prove that he actually was, you're still not seeing everything he has ever done. Okay. So therefore, the response to that question, does God keep his own laws, has to be based on principles.
Absolutely.
You know, we can't say, okay, I've answered every question that you brought up in the Bible where it looked like God didn't keep his own laws, and prove from the Bible every time that he did keep it. You still can't prove from that he always keeps his own laws. He's done lots of things that aren't in the Bible. I mean, he runs the universe. So it's kind of almost I wouldn't say a silly question, but it's unanswerable unless you do it based on principles. And that's what we tried to do on Wednesday night, was to look at principles. Michael, you have a point.
No, I'm just agreeing entirely with you, Ray. It's got to be principle and nothing else, because nothing else can work otherwise.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So-
what it just reminded, reminded a comment that, you know, God didn't propose to remove all occasions for doubt. If you want a doubt, you can always hang your hat on a doubt. And that's what those two questions did on last great day. That's what they did for me anyway.
Okay, good. Jeff?
Yeah, I think when you are narrowly focused on like a certain question like this here, we need to be pulling back and seeing the big picture. So it could appear on the surface like God's breaking, you know, his own law, but really, what is he up to here? You know, like what is he actually doing? What's the big picture thing? Because, you know, if my child is riding their bike down the hill towards a freeway, I might need to tackle them and, you know, kick their bike over to stop them from, and that may appear like I'm breaking, you know, a law of love or something, but I'm saving them. And someone else might not see what would have happened if I didn't interfere there. So I think when we zoom out, we see, you know, like if an ox has fallen in the well, we're, you know, on the Sabbath, right? Like to preserve life, or I think it's just always keeping in mind the bigger picture of who God is and what he's up to.
Right, good. Yeah, we need to take things in context And there's not only the immediate context of a verse, but there's the context of that book of the Bible. There's a context of the whole Bible and all the big principles that are in it. And there's even, okay, let's look at one more verse here. Judy, Titus 1 and verse 2.
In hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised before time began.
Okay, so that's telling us that God cannot lie. But what if that verse is a lie? You know?
That verse is a lie.
Yeah. I mean, Titus wrote it under inspiration of God. Was there a lie telling us that God can't lie? I mean, you have to look at the big principles, don't you? And, okay, so I said,
Says otherwise.
yeah, it said it's not useful to answer God, does God always keep his own law? Because that verse could be a lie. So it comes down to the principles, and ultimately, as Michael said a minute ago, comes down to faith. Okay, comes down to our faith
Faith
in
and
God.
not doubt.
Yeah,
Amen.
faith and not doubt. Okay, do you want to take just a few more minutes? We had this kind of a slow start, so we'll look at the next question. It won't take long. This is another question brought up Wednesday night. If I allow evil, I am culpable or guilty, that is, for it. He mentioned the vulnerability of love. If you love someone, you become vulnerable. We say God is love, but reserve the right to make him omnipotent. The two are diametrically opposed. Because what he's saying there is, if God is love, there are things he cannot do, I guess. As soon as you love a person, you become subject to them. And that makes sense. You're subject to do what is best for them. You can't, these are all the comments within the overall question. You cannot have your own way all the time and claim you love the person. God is forced away when we make a choice contrary to his will. He respects our choice. He doesn't allow it. He has no option. Okay, so that was kind of good and one of the more deep and philosophical sort of questions. Is God omnipotent? Let's start there.
Which means all powerful.
Means all powerful. Potent is potency, power. Jeff.
I just have his hand up.
Oh, is your hand just still up?
Sorry, I'm guilty of leaving my hand up. There we go.
It's hard to see against your background there in that case.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, be aware of the upper left corner of your screen and what's there, and it can make it hard to see sometimes. Okay, yeah, so God, is God omnipotent? I think we agree he is. However, he cannot do anything that is against his character. And therefore he cannot lie. That's the reason he cannot lie, because it would be going against his character. I think that makes sense.
Because he's truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Right, right.
Yep.
That's
Right.
what Yeshua said.
Yes.
Amen.
Okay. Okay, I'll read this verse here, comment along the way. Deuteronomy 31, 16 to 18, which we've looked at before. And the Lord said unto Moses, behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me, and break my covenant which I have made with them. In what way are they forsaking him?
By going after the other gods.
Okay. It's not just like turning their backs to wherever they think God is and taking steps like walking away from him. It's turning to other gods, which would require what to happen in their mind before they go and bow down to another god?
Lack of trust.
Okay, lack of trust, some reason to not bow down to the God of heaven. And they're going to turn and bow down to this other God instead. So that's what they're doing. And then it says in verse 17, so this is now God reacting, then My anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them. So that they will say in that day, are not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they have wrought, and that they have turned unto other gods. Okay, so there's two uses of forsake there. They will forsake me. And then it says in verse 17, I will forsake them. So looking at the definition of the word, the Hebrew word that's translated forsake, and it's something like azab, it includes two, among the definitions, it includes both of these: to leave, abandon, forsake, neglect, apostatize. And I would say that applies to the first forsake in that passage. That's what they, the people, were doing to him, to God. In the second case, this definition fits: to let loose, set free, let go, or free. That was God's reaction. He's basically saying, this God of love who respects our free will is saying, if they want to worship other gods, I have to let them do it. Jeff.
Have any of you ever seen that TV show Intervention?
No.
It's basically it's an A&E documentary show about people who are like drug addicts, and then the family gets together and has this intervention where they get together and they figure out how to help this person, right? And again, going back to like parenting here. So if you have a child who's a drug addict, in a way they've forsaken you, right? They have turned away, they've gone astray. And the solution in this show always to the best way for these parents to help these kids is actually to stop enabling them, to stop giving them money, to stop letting them stay at their homes. So in a way, those parents in turn forsake those children for their benefit, to allow them to stumble. And when those children, those drug addicts, hit their rock bottom, that's when they get that sting in their conscience, right? Just like you mentioned earlier, where was it the Israelites or something, when we were talking about the no bow and no sword, like where they were convicted, they came to the end of themselves. So when I see this double forsaking here, I think of it as in that same way where the people turn from God. So he basically kind of turns away in his own way. But this is also following in line with the character of God. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Okay, good. So in that case of that show you mentioned, you don't see them as using force in those situations. They're just withdrawing support, would be a better way.
No, they simply say, son, I love you, but I cannot enable you anymore. If we continue to let you stay here and we continue to give you money, you're going to continue doing the things that you're doing that are not healthy. So we love you so much that we're not letting you stay here, and we will no longer be giving you money. No. So they're not doing anything by force. They're simply removing their provision and protection. Exactly.
Yeah. So
and then they usually, yeah.
So they're doing this last definition here: to let loose, set free, allow the person to receive the results of their choices.
100%. Yeah.
Good. Okay, that's a good example. Good. So to allow to allow evil could imply approval. Think of those examples, and we've talked about some of these before. Did God allow divorce, slavery, Israel to have a king? There's a long list of things that happened that God did not use force to stop. So in a sense, he allowed them, but he did not approve of any of them. And often he gave reasons why those practices were not good. So he could physically prevent many things, but that would be to use force. And I don't see that as being part of God's character. He has no choice, because he respects our free will, but to allow us to go certain directions. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Any final comments about that? I hope that was helpful. Interesting, looking at the word hornet, what you can come up with and the connections you can make. Gary.
Yes, I'd like to throw something into your mind for consideration. Since you are obviously a very thorough studier, have you ever considered, especially in light of the weaker folks like myself who have weak brains when it comes to a lot of this stuff, don't know a lot of it, don't understand a lot of it, have you ever considered doing a study on the book of Revelation? I mean, as far as I know, there's nobody that has done a comprehensive study of the book of Revelation. If it's in Maranatha, I've never seen it. I've seen bits and pieces, but who has actually taken the book and made sense of it?
Okay, I would
I
respond.
mean, you're the type of person that you're thorough enough that you could actually do that and be trusted to do it without reading stuff into it that's not there.
Okay, we've done that. We did a study of Revelation.
You have?
Sessions just like this, same length, but in person, and it took, I think, 70 sessions to get through the book of Revelation. So over 100 hours in meeting. And Michael was involved in some of that. Paul was, Dorothy was, but that was done some years ago. I'm not sure how many.
Yes.
If I was to do it again, I would very much include this emphasis on God's character, which I'm sure came into it somewhat then,
Yeah.
but I
Yes.
wouldn't have understood it to the same degree or emphasized it nearly as much. And those are all on my other website. I have a second website. If you're interested, I can send you the link to that and you can look at them if you want. Right now, though, I'm
I
trying
need
to
the
do-
updated version.
Yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Not 70 hours of it, 70 sessions. But right now, I'll just say that my emphasis is on completing the glossary, the words in this glossary, because I'm actually getting close.
Yes.
There's the list. All the ones in blue are active links. And I think a lot of people are finding this to be a valuable resource. Some of the ones that are not showing as active links, we've actually done
It is.
group. I just have not edited them up to post them on my website. So I have some catching up to do, which I should be able to start doing more so now, I hope. Anyway, that's my answer to that. Anything else?
Is that a rejection?
No. It's just be patient. Be patient.